Our focus has allowed us to build the best product experience that you can have in the space.
You raised over $100 million, so the company is clearly on a growth trajectory. And for you as the CPO, as you think about the future, like how do you go about planning strategy?
I believe that we've gotten to a point where it's basically the equivalent of using an all-in-one system. And the way that we've done that is by having very strong... We're taking our first step into multi-channel right now, actually, where we're going from SMS to RCS, which is essentially like a souped-up version of SMS that allows you to do all the things that we've been dreaming of with interactive content. And then Horizon 3, which is like nearest and dearest to my heart because I'm an entrepreneur, is the 0 to 1 experiences. It's like the seeds that you're planting, right? When you think about A/B tests, you're inherently limited by the number of tests that you can run. And what we figured out how to do is essentially run an infinitely running A/B test.
Hey, this is Carlos's AI voice clone. He is the CEO of Product School and the host of the Product Podcast. He asked me to set the stage for today's guest before he takes over the interview. Chiara McPhee is the Chief Product Officer at Postscript, a company that's revolutionizing SMS marketing for e-commerce brands. With over $100 million in annual recurring revenue, ARR, and more than 20,000 Shopify merchants using their platform, Postscript has become a powerhouse in conversational commerce. Their SMS marketing tools have helped generate over $2 billion in e-commerce revenue for their customers annually, with open rates exceeding 90%, far outpacing traditional email marketing. Before joining Postscript, Chiara led marketing products at Twilio and founded her own marketing startup, which was backed by Y Combinator. In this episode, Chiara shares her insights on leveraging generative AI to create personalized one-to-one conversations that drive revenue, how AI agents are outperforming human customer support in certain areas, key revenue leading indicators in SMS marketing and setting up effective attribution models, overcoming challenges in scaling infrastructure to achieve $100 million in annual recurring revenue, the benefits of focusing exclusively on Shopify, the Horizon strategy approach to building teams tailored for Horizon 1, cash cow, Horizon 2, growth, and Horizon 3, moonshots, balancing short-term wins with long-term ambitious goals and product development. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the show, Chiara.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Chiara, I've heard that you are an avid rock climber.
I try. I'm passionate about it. I'm not the world's greatest, but I find I just have a ton of fun with my family in that sport.
What's the craziest rock climbing adventure you've done?
Honestly, there's probably two. I used to live in the Bay Area for quite some time. My husband and I actually got into the sport together and we were like, we have to climb in Yosemite. Let's just do it. And so we did a class with a whole bunch of certified mountain guides and all that sort of stuff. For the first trip that we did there, we got to know one of them quite well. We were like, hey, off the record, would you take us up a multi-pitch, which is like, 600-700 feet. We're not talking about El Cap or anything crazy like that. And so we ended up doing it. I don't think I totally internalized, like we're literally like placing gear, tying the anchors, and then trying to go up. So we made it, and I'm still here, obviously, to tell the tale, but that was a big one. But you'd think we learned our lesson. We actually did the same thing in Sardinia. We found a hostel at the time we were traveling, and it just ended up getting to know this guy, Ricky, and he was like, let's go out. Let's just do something fun, and ended up having a big adventure with him too. So I don't know. There's a lot of trust in the climbing space, and it's one of the things I love about it.
I have so much respect for rock climbers. I mean, I play sports, but different type. Like I play tennis, and one of the things that I like about it is how connected it is with work in a way, right? Like, so I'm curious if in your own experience practicing rock climbing, there are any parallels that you've seen between that and what you do as a product leader?
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about rock climbing is there's no one way to do it. Everybody has a really different body type. And especially when you get into outdoor climbing, you never really know what you're going to encounter, especially if you're trying different crags and all that sort of stuff. And so for me, it's really cool because there's a parallel in terms of finding your own line. What I mean by that is like when you're looking at a route and you have a destination at the top, there's just so many different ways to get there. And there's going to be points along the way where you hit walls and you have to change your strategy. And every single person has their own skill sets. So it's kind of an interesting parallel that I find helpful.
So when you are not rock climbing, you are the Chief Product Officer at Postscript.
I am.
Tell me more about your company. What does it really do?
Yeah, so we do SMS marketing automation with a really laser focus on trying to make e-commerce merchants on Shopify as much money as possible from the channel.
All right, just give me such softballs here. Well, SMS can be the most hated channel for some people. I know it can also be extremely effective. And I like how you talk about SMS to drive e-commerce revenue. So let's talk about what actually makes a really good SMS from an e-commerce perspective.
Yeah. So I think having it be highly relevant to the recipient has always been a goal of marketers. I think marketers exist to try and engage, right? We're not evil people. We're really trying to like help people understand a brand, get to know amazing products that we're passionate about, et cetera. So when I embody the persona that we serve as the retention marketer, we really try to empower them with tools that enable them to engage their audience. And I think one of the most unique things about SMS as a channel is it allows you to have a conversation. It allows marketers to actually talk to the people that they serve and really get to know their customers. And I think that is something that's pretty darn unique compared to email or push notifications, of which both I've spent a lot of my career.
So, I mean, obviously, something that comes to mind is the word spam, right? Like we've all received horrible text messages from who knows who. So what is it that you are doing uniquely to ensure that those SMS are well received by a customer?
First off, I would say, especially coming out of an election season, we've all been inundated, and there's a whole bunch of regulatory challenges with what goes on with election season and what people are allowed to send that they otherwise wouldn't be. And that's a whole can of worms. One of the things that I'm really proud of with Postscript is I really believe we are the most compliant SMS marketing platform that's out there. We have a huge legal team and compliance team that's dedicated to making sure that every single e-commerce shop that signs up for Postscript goes through rigorous checks to make sure that they're in it for the right reasons. We also have auditing capabilities to make sure that what's getting sent is compliant with every law you can imagine, in whether it's specific to California, across the US, and a lot of GDPR in Europe now. So yeah, we focus very heavily on that because we believe that there's trust that needs to be had between marketers and the customers that they serve. And we believe that at the end of the day, to have a productive conversation, you can't be spamming people, right? Like it has to be valuable, and otherwise they're not going to buy and they're just going to be wasting money on the channel.
That's the thing. And I think in the past, it used to work when there was less maturity in the market, especially with email, right? It was a free-for-all game where like, companies that email you or message you the most win. When in the opposite world, like the customers are highly educated and they've been burned so much that now it requires a very unique strategy, I guess, to stay relevant and make sure that this is treated the right way. Would you provide some specific examples on how, use cases or examples on how this can work for someone who is already on an e-commerce site considering to buy something?
Yeah. So when you land on a site, you're often hit with a pop-up. It's a common way for brands to try and capture your information so they can start that conversation with you over time. So we have invested really heavily in trying to figure out the most effective ways to get brands to engage with consumers with that first touch point. And once you're on somebody's list, and this applies, by the way, whether it's an email or an SMS, at that point, typically marketers will take that information and couple it with anything that they can learn about you as a consumer, whether it's your activity on the site, things that you've purchased, et cetera. And they use that to identify how to follow up with an offer or starting a conversation that's going to be most relevant to you as an individual. What I'll say is, this has been the goal of marketers forever. I mean, this is direct mail in many ways, right? Like it's just been the way of marketers. And I think we've always tried to get the perfect message to every individual that's going to really capture their hearts and minds. And I think the reality is, though, when you look at the past decade, especially starting with email, which was, I think, like the big follow-on, if you look at the history from direct mail into email, it really did start with just sending a ton of messages. But really, 5-6 years ago, marketing automation for email became mainstream. And that unlocks the opportunity to do that for other channels like SMS, which is, I think, relatively new comparatively. The coolest thing, though, that I'm excited about is AI changes everything, especially generative tech. So I started a company back in 2013, and we were so gung-ho about building, basically democratizing effective email marketing for small Shopify businesses. And we thought we had this huge edge, and honestly, we did at the time, where you could suck out all of this information from Shopify about what people were doing on a brand site. And the reality is we tried to use all this predictive analytics to predict the best send time, to predict the best offer, to predict trying to, the perfect colors, all that sort of stuff. But what was missing is the ability to have the perfect message, to have that conversation, and to actually talk to people in a way that wasn't robotic. And so, yeah, that changes completely with the generative AI wave that's happening right now. And it unlocks a lot of different opportunities for us.
And I see you also work at Twilio, right? Which in a way is the ultimate beast in all things marketing automation.
It,
So
it
how was that
is.
experience for you?
Yeah, so the way that I got to Twilio was through a series of events. So I started a company in email automation. We got acquired by SendGrid, which was really the biggest email API solution out there on the market. We were there and very lucky to be at a time when the company was going public. And then shortly thereafter, Twilio acquired us. And so the thing that was so cool about that entire chain of events is just seeing how you go from startup to scale, because Twilio was the first time that I had the opportunity to think about marketing strategies that span multiple channels, right? I'd been very focused on SMS and to a certain extent, like ads based on email. But with Twilio, it unlocks like SMS obviously is the core of the business, but voice and video and push notifications and how you think about message orchestration across the board. I was really passionate at the time that I was working there about the notion of B2C CRM, which has really never been a thing that's come to fruition. And again, with generative AI, I think that future is finally here.
So one of the things that blew my mind as I was doing some research, one of the comments from your CEO was that you're estimating you generated over $2 billion a year in e-commerce revenue for your merchants.
Yeah.
Through SMS. So tell me more about that.
Yeah. So first of all, Adam's brilliant. The founders of this company are the biggest reason that I joined. Like, we have an incredible team of very smart people who are exceptional at what they do. And really, at the end of the day, the goal of a marketer is to help make their brand more money, right? They're running businesses. And one of the things that's really unique about SMS is that people read them. So having spent a lot of my career in email, so much of it goes to spam. A lot of that's because of the Gmail filters and all that good stuff now, which is there for a reason. But SMS, like, people actually engage. I mean, the open rates are still north of 90%, whereas you're very, very lucky if you're getting into the 30s for email. And so, yeah, it just, people engage. And I think it's our responsibility as the folks building MarTech to support SMS automation is to make sure that we are constantly adopting the latest technology to make those messages that marketers send as effective as possible.
So how are you thinking in terms of integrating the SMS channel with other channels within MarTech? Right? You mentioned email, push notification. There's also other channels now with WhatsApp, DMs on social media, and pop-ups. So in order to orchestrate all of this holistically, like, what's the right way to go about it?
Yeah, so we're taking our first step into multi-channel right now, actually, where we're going from SMS to RCS, which is essentially like a souped up version of SMS that allows you to do all the things that we've been dreaming of with interactive content. Like, imagine having a carousel inside your text message feed that you can put products in that people can swipe through, similar to what we've had in ads on Instagram, for example, for a very long time. So we're investing heavily there, and it's going to be a journey over probably the course of the next year, because we have to work with Apple and Google and all the carriers. So there's a lot of parties that go into making this new channel format a success. So that one is our first. And the reason why I'm so bullish on it is because it allows customers to have conversations. Like, SMS in and of itself enables replies. Whereas when you think about email, so many of the messages that you get are from a no reply address, right? That's not engaging. And so with SMS, like, you can set up your campaign structure to include replies that allow you to have a dialogue. With RCS, when you have all of that rich media content, all of a sudden you can do really cool things. There's a company, I think they're based out of LA, called Nudge Text. They do they basically send people messages on all the cool things they could do in their neighborhood over the weekend. And they, I think, are a great example of a company that's leading the pack in what's possible with conversational messaging. So as you might imagine, we want to go from SMS to RCS, but then WhatsApp is super interesting to us. Conversational email is also interesting. I'm not going to count it out. I think there's a lot of opportunity to reimagine the channel in ways that we haven't yet. And so, yeah, those are the big ones that are on the near-term horizon.
And for the channels that you are not directly pursuing, and so you are thinking more about the integration with other platforms, How do you go about that?
In terms of like, how do we choose which channel to pursue next, or?
In general, it's building versus maybe in this case integrating, right? Like I understand
Oh
you are
yeah,
going to continue exploring rich ways to engage with your audience through SMS as a channel, but like
yeah,
there are many other channels, email, for example. So when a customer, let's say a marketer is trying to orchestrate a campaign through different channels, and they think of Postscript as that SMS
yeah.
solution, how do you go about integrating your solution with other channels?
Yeah, so I would argue the two most important owned media channels for retention marketers are SMS and email. And I think we're starting to see SMS eclipse email in terms of the efficacy in driving revenue outcomes. But it doesn't mean that email is not critically important. I've spent like over a decade of my life in email, so I do love the channel too. One of the things that we've invested in is really deep integrations with the best of breed email solutions that are out there. I think our integration with Klaviyo in particular, which is a company that we deeply respect, was second to none. And we will always be continuing to make that integration as strong as humanly possible. I believe that we've gotten it to a point where it's basically the equivalent of using an all-in-one system. And the way that we've done that is by having very strong event-based relationships so that we can pass information to them and vice versa. So I think, again, I wouldn't count it out that Postscript doesn't enter email at some point. I think any marketing automation suite is going to need that channel for a long time to come. But for right now, while we are focused on the conversational channels as our primary strategy, we want to make sure that we are very, very tightly coupled with the best out there in email.
And that is a very, I think, important strategic decision. Like you can either go deep into one thing or try to go a little broader. And most companies eventually choose to go broader to increase TAM. And I get that. But it seems like at least for Postscript at the beginning, you're choosing to go deeper into just one thing, which is SMS. So tell me more about kind of how you balance those options and eventually decided to choose one.
Yeah, so we on an annual basis do a fairly healthy TAM analysis. And when you look at our business, we are rapidly growing. We are one of the dominant players in SMS in the Shopify space. When we think about TAM, we have so much that is untapped because we're only on Shopify right now. And one of the biggest areas that we're focused on is trying to figure out how we serve custom build sites. We call it custom carts, like $165 billion untapped opportunity for us. And even the incumbents in the space are still like scratching the surface in what's available there. Just to clarify, what I mean by custom cart is like people who have built their own website, people that have their own checkout flows, like Nike is a great example. And so when I think about TAM that's untapped, I think about the growth opportunities that we have to go serve a broader market of e-commerce marketers.
So when you talk about e-commerce, and I also heard you use the word Shopify, are you looking at all kinds of e-commerce sites, or is it specifically Shopify-powered e-commerce?
Today, it's 100% Shopify-powered e-commerce.
Well, give me a scale of how many of those e-commerce are actually powered by Shopify.
Many. I mean, at this point, like I think there's millions on Shopify, but don't quote me on that. I'd want to check. But we serve 20,000 at this point. And one of the things that we found a lot of success in the early days of Shopify is focusing on the long tail. And you go into the Shopify App Store, which is where we originally got a lot of our growth from. We have, I think, like 4.9 out of 5. Like we were a very, very highly rated app. And that's actually quite hard to achieve in that space with so much competition. Today, though, our really big focus is actually continuing to move up market. It's not to say that we don't love our bread and butter mom and pops. We're still making sure that we invest in that core area. But as we grow as a business, we need to identify different segments that are also high growth opportunities. And for us, that ends up being what we call the Shop Plus accounts. It's typically the ones that are enterprise, super enterprise, talking about like 8, 9, 10 figure brands.
Yeah. So that's another, I think, interesting strategic point here, because it's not just choosing, in your case, going deep into one thing, which is SMS. It's also picking Shopify in this case. And obviously Shopify is massive, but I'm very curious to know what are the pros and cons here, right? Because as you are building within, let's say, the Shopify App Store, in a way you're pretty dependent on what Shopify is defining. So how do you think about that versus also allowing other types of e-commerce to have the SMS capability?
Yeah, so I am extraordinarily bullish on being able to serve customers that are off Shopify. That's one of our big strategic initiatives that we are working on now. And it's not that I don't love the Shopify ecosystem. It's by far the fastest growing of all e-commerce platforms. In many ways, it's made our lives very easy because they provide us with structured data. It's very uniform. We can use it and build upon it quite simply, and they're great partners. I think the TAM opportunity, though, with these typically upmarket businesses that have had felt the need to build their own site experiences is just too big to pass up. So what that means for us is that we're going to actually start to think a lot more about developer experience, DX, right? We have to really level up our APIs. We need to make sure that we're working with agency partners. We need to make sure that we are thinking about the product experience for this very different customer off Shopify that typically has more engineering access and is focused on custom builds.
I think that makes sense. I've seen that play in other companies that started as a Slack app or as a Salesforce app, and it eventually started building additional capabilities outside a specific platform that they don't own. But I think that starting relatively small, or at least being very specific with who you are serving first, gave them that additional edge instead of trying to go too wide too quickly.
Yeah, I am a staunch believer in focus. I really believe that if you find your wedge, exploit it. Maybe exploit's kind of a gross word, but like capture it. And I think that that's one of the big things that actually drew me to Postscript. I'm coming up on 1 year at the company, so I'm still relatively new in the grand scheme of things, right? And to me, like really the company's success so far and focusing in a laser-like way on SMS with Shopify has led to our success. And I'll have to double check that I can say this out loud, but I do actually believe we're the first $100 million company that's been built exclusively on Shopify. A lot of the other large companies in the space have expanded off Shopify a lot earlier than we have. And I think that our focus has allowed us to build the best product experience that you can have in the space.
So you said $100 million is it ARR?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So huge milestone. And I also know you raised over $100 million. So the company is clearly on a growth trajectory. And for you as a CPO, as you think about the future, like how do you go about planning strategy? I'm very interested in how you break down what it is that you want to do now versus also creating some space for some of the moonshots.
Couple things that we do. So one, we in the past year have really up-leveled how we do annual planning. And to be honest, every company I've ever worked for has a different annual planning process every single year. I don't know if that's true of everybody or if I've just gotten that experience strangely in my career. But we stood ours up this year very intentionally. And it was a very thoughtful process that was a collaboration across all of the different functions in the company to try and identify how we go arm in arm to tackle some of the biggest market opportunities that are out there. So that was, I think, within our team, a really big success. It was a lot of hard work. I think some blood, sweat, and tears went into it, but it was worth it because coming into 2025, we're now actually all on the same page and rowing in the same direction, which I think is going to result in our biggest year yet. So that's part one. I think part two comes down to how you structure your PDE team. So we have structured ourselves essentially by horizon. And I don't know if I should go into essentially the horizon strategy. It's like a way of structuring a product portfolio that I learned from Kinsey. And it's been around since the 70s. You can read all about it. And there's a ton of brilliance, and I very much follow it everywhere I go. Essentially, when you think about horizon strategy, there's 3 parts to it. Horizon 1 is really your cash cow. It's like the product that has resulted in revenue that's paying the salaries of everybody that works at the company, right? It's what's keeping you alive. And it has earned you the right to invest in some new opportunities that hopefully are the big hits that become your other major independent product lines. So for us, SMS marketing is the big one, right? Horizon 2 is, think of it as like a late seed, early Series A, like strong line of sight to product market fit. It may not be 100% there yet, but like you're going to pump money into it because you believe in the future of it. And then Horizon 3, which is like nearest and dearest to my heart because I'm an entrepreneur, is the 0 to 1 experiences. It's like the seeds that you're planting, right? These are the ones that have the highest conviction that you want to invest in at the earliest stage, with the hope that a handful of them become Horizon 2, and then those graduate to Horizon 1 and so on. So we've structured our team this way. SMS marketing being Horizon 1. We have a conversational SMS sales product, which is really Horizon 2, as well as an acquisition we did that does like fintech cashback stuff. I'm happy to talk about if that's interesting. And then the third for us is all of our AI products. So really trying to think about how do we power one-to-one 100% AI marketing conversations between a brand and their customers.
I want to go in so many different directions. So I'm going to try to break this down. Well, first of all, thank you, because I think it's always great to hear a leader talk about their framework.
Yeah.
Now, as you think about connecting that to the way your team is structured,
Yeah.
tell me more about that, like the teams that maybe are doing more 0 to 1 versus the team that are working more on the cash cows. How do you go about setting the team up for success?
Yeah. So when you think about the types of work that's done in those different horizons, it really is quite different. So when you think about Horizon 1 being kind of the core platform teams, you have a lot of heavy infrastructure teams, like our messaging platform sits there, our data platform sits there, Flow Builder, which has become a platform that powers all of the SMS marketing and is underpinning every single other product we've built, sits there. The products that we have there are really focused on scalability and making sure that we can keep pace with the growth that we're experiencing as a business. And those products are getting more and more complicated. The bigger you get as an organization, you just have more complex needs to scale them. So when you think about what sets those teams up for success, it's things like really heavy focus on mid to long-term product experiences, right? Or like engineering investments in particular. We try to do planning that looks out like how can we support our growth over like basically like a 2-year horizon at that point, because you don't want to be building infrastructure that's going to then become obsolete in like 6 to 12 months. It's not great. So that's what we do for Horizon 1. Whereas on the polar opposite of the spectrum for Horizon 3, it's a lot more like, hey, let's throw together a one-pager. Let's get tiger teams on these things. Let's rapid prototype. Let's get customer feedback super quickly and iteratively with design partners that we're really close with. And so they're much more customer facing and like day to day trying to learn as much as we can as quickly as possible from the customers we serve on what's going to be most effective for them.
Is it all product design and engineering, or are there any other functions that are part of your org?
So PD officially, and then we are doing a lot of work to make sure that we have alignment with product marketing as well as BI. And so those teams sit outside of PDE right now and are incredible partners for us that are critical for us to make sure that we are building the right products over time and then launching them in a way that's really compelling. So I think that as we think about these 3 horizons, we're really starting to see the structure of the org match them.
So I'm clear on the org for the Horizon number 1 and then the Tiger team for Horizon number 3. Like, how do you go about that Horizon number 2?
Yeah, so it's a messy middle. So when I think about the 2 products that we have there, SMS sales, just to explain what it is for a second, we have hired an incredible contact center of sales associates that actually have conversations on behalf of a brand with consumers to help drive them to a close. And it's been extraordinarily effective and also been the testing ground for a lot of what we're building with our AI products. And so that product has been alive, I want to say 1.5 years, coming up on 2 years, and it's hit its growth curve now. And it's actually very quite successful. And the big question for us is, how do we make sure that we are capturing all of those human-based insights that we've learned from that and train agents through AI to be able to emulate that in the future in a way that obviously doesn't have hallucinations, is safe and scalable and all that good stuff. So that's some of the problems that we face there, which are quite unique to that product area. Versus when you look at Fondue, which is essentially a cashback program, we're trying to displace the discount code, the ubiquitous 15% welcome code, right? That everybody gets by giving their phone number. When you think about the opportunity with cashback, if it works like a rebate, just nerd out on this for a second, it's really cool because it can increase the lifetime value of the customer and decrease the customer acquisition cost and the repeat purchase. And so it's way better for the profitability product line for our merchants when they use it to drive acquisition through it. So the problems within those 2 different spaces are quite distinct. And when you think about Horizon 2, you really need leaders who are going to be deep business-minded problem solvers. It's really folks who are trying to figure out, like, how do I root out the systemic challenges, like the problem du jour, to make sure that we continue to find our place toward a hockey stick. And so it really is the messy middle. You kind of have to have an appetite for being like a mid-stage entrepreneur.
And I guess AI is kind of there, right? Because even though there's a lot of opportunity in the future, there's already a lot of practical things that are happening now.
Yeah.
So I heard you reference AI multiple times. I would love to learn specific use cases within AI, right? Like I'm a consumer of a lot of places online, and I've always had that experience of like, okay, I enter my phone number, I get a spammy text. When I get the code, then I cancel the text change, and then that's it.
Yep.
So what's the next level there? Give me some specifics on like how companies can truly leverage this channel in a way that is personalized and more effective.
I really think the lines are blurring between sales and support into conversations. And what I mean by that is I think the most effective SMS programs have been trying to figure out ways to use automated replies to be able to drive getting to know someone, or at least the appearance of that. What we learned with SMS sales is that people want to talk. And it's not every person. You may not be that person, but like, for example, if you're shopping and you are talking to Kizik because you want to buy a pair of sneakers, and you may have like really narrow feet. It's the problem I have, right? Like trying to talk them to understand like, hey, which of these are actually going to fit me better? Because I don't want to have to go through and dig through all of the different like true to size modules that they have within their product detail pages. When you think about Kizik with those narrow feet, like I actually want to talk to something that's going to give me an answer, and it's going to actually make me want to buy the shoes more if I'm already on their site, right? The thing that's cool though is when you are having a conversation with someone, asking them about their sizing, the shape of their foot, etc., you can ask them like, hey, what are you buying these for? And in my case, it's like, I just need a pair of sneakers that are going to look okay when I go out to dinner on the town, that are not going to be like, my Hokas and stuff like that. I need them to be slip on because I've got a 4-year-old, and I need them to be like durable, right? And so that's what I disclose to the sales associate. When you have that conversation, you all of a sudden, as a marketer, now know I have a daughter. I like to go out to food. I'm also a runner in case I end up going in that direction. And you learn all of this we call zero-party data that is extraordinarily rich, that only comes from a conversation. So then what ends up happening is Kizik can then say like, hey, I launched a runner that also looks nice. Are you interested in this? Hey, I don't think they do this yet, but like we offer kids shoes, like kind of like what Allbirds did at one point. Like that sort of stuff starts to open up so many opportunities to re-engage in a conversation that's actually useful to the consumer. And that's where we think that the space is going.
I like that approach, is blurring the sales team with customer support or service, which is actually what happened with the chatbots, or like with the live chats on a lot of websites. Yep. I think that's bringing that to text, which has way higher open rate and doesn't rely on you having to connect to a browser to continue the conversation.
Yeah, and it's also async, so you can have the conversation on your own time. And the other cool thing is when you're mobile shopping, which like the vast majority of e-commerce purchases are mobile, it's much easier to toggle between a text thread versus having chat on a site where you're like trying to X out, but if you X out, you're going to have to start over and like all that grossness that on-site chat has. So yeah, it's something that we found to be very effective.
I've used the agent, Amazon's agent, I think they call it Rufus, which sometimes would provide some suggestions and comparisons between products that I'm browsing. So it sounds like it's along those lines in an SMS space, and with the ability to also engage with a human.
Yes, exactly. And then when you think about from the beginning of our conversation, when you go toward multi-channel, when you can take those experiences, make them really rich with RCS, and then start to explore what you can do on WhatsApp when we expand to EMEA in particular, where it's a lot more powerful of a channel. When you think about conversational email, let's get rid of the no reply. It's definitely an option. There's just so many things that you can do once you have that relationship. You can start to engage with people in the areas that are most convenient for them, and it becomes a dialogue that occurs over time between a brand and their consumers.
Let's geek out on metrics, because as I can imagine, you're powering tons of messages. Like, what are obviously a goal is revenue generated for your customers, but like, what are some of those specific leading indicators that you care a lot about?
Yeah. So right now, fun fact, probably not something every product leader does, but when you think about Horizon strategy, those 1, 2, 3 that I was mentioning before, typically, when you look at the by the books way to invest in your teams, it ends up being like 70% of your budget goes toward Horizon 1, 20 toward 2, and 10 toward 3. We are pretty close to flipping. That's not quite there. We're like 50, 30, 20, maybe even like 25, 25 at this point. So we're heavily weighting toward those earlier stage products right now. And as a result, the KPIs that we're looking for are really about, for Horizon 2, as you would imagine, adoption and retention. Horizon 1, the number one thing that I encourage our teams to look for, and this will sound like maybe too overly simple, is get to 10 to 15 referenceable customers, like people who are the diehards. They're going to want to talk on Twitter. They're going to sign up for those case studies. They want to use this product. They love this product. If you can get to 10 to 15 referenceable customers, you're onto something. And so I know that may be overly simplistic, but it's a big thing that works for us.
Yeah, so let's talk about how to get there. I can imagine that with timing of the message is important, the reliability. I don't know how you measure that. Actually, click-through rate, if you will, when you're not clicking. But attribution is a huge problem in marketing, right? Like, okay, someone bought, but how do we give credit? Is it because of the last message? Is it because of that email? Like, how do you go about truly ensuring that SMS is actually working to convert?
Yeah. So a couple things. So Postscript started with a very straightforward industry standard attribution model. We focus on last touch and then view throughs. And the reason why is because we're one of many channels that a marketing team is using to connect with their audience. And we don't want to presume that we are over attributing, right? So most text messages have a link in it. And so it's very easy to measure the click-through rate. And then because we are built on top of Shopify, we can see the flow through of a purchase through UTM links. And so it's fairly straightforward for how we do attribution today. When we introduce more channels, multi-touch attribution becomes a thing for us. But what I'm really a lot more excited about is incrementality testing. We do this with SMS sales today. The idea is essentially you have a holdout group. And so at the end of the day, what you can do is test, like, in a perfect world, no messages going to anyone versus certain different types of messages to figure out what is most effective over time. And that, I believe, is the future because it's as unbiased as you can get and really helps you understand the direct dollars that are coming from an experience that you're creating.
It sounds like applying some of the same principles and success metrics that have worked in other channels, mostly email, now into this new context. So you can A/B test messages, you can automate sequences with auto replies, you can do all of this logic. We are building a platform that allows that.
100%. Can I tell you about a cool product? Actually, we haven't talked about this one yet. So in Horizon 3, we, over the summer, launched this amazing product called Infinity Testing that when you think about one of the big the opportunities for generative AI, it's the ability to generate a lot of content, right? When you think about A/B tests, you're inherently limited by the number of tests that you can run. And what we figured out how to do is essentially run what's essentially an infinitely running A/B test. We joked internally about calling this like A to Z testing plus, right? Like, it's a terrible name. So what this product does is essentially says, like, hey, let's say you have an abandoned cart message. Typically, they all say the same thing. People actually don't really test them very often, which is a mistake. What we've done is said, like, hey, let's take your brand voice. Let's learn to emulate it. And we have a bunch of very fancy models that can now very, very much emulate exactly what a marketer is looking for their voice, which is important to them. And then we create many, many hundreds of different variants, and then we test them over time to figure out what works. And we explore and exploit the different opportunities to continue to hone those models. We are seeing like 20 to 30% lift in revenue on these these flows, and it's something that's been extremely effective. We're also now taking that technology and bringing it over to campaigns. And that's really important because when you think of a marketer's portfolio, like 87% of the messages that they send are actually campaigns. And so if you can take the AI-based approach to testing to identify those big opportunities and then nail them with this new way of doing A/B testing, we really think that's the future.
I think that's one of the biggest problems I've seen with companies that implement any kind of marketech platform. The platform does a lot of things, but you need someone to make the most out of them. And then eventually the person in charge ends up just sending the classic weekly newsletter with a bunch of spammy notifications, right? So I can imagine how now AI agents in this case can amplify that for whoever is running the platform, right? Like, tell me more about those specific things. You mentioned using AI to adapt to the voice.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So for example, like, Carlos, you might respond well to a humorous message where I respond to urgency, right? So really trying to understand what's going to resonate with the end consumer. Marketers today are doing their best with the data they have, but like at the end of the day, you can only do so much with, Chiara has an iPhone and Carlos doesn't, right? Like, cool. What are you going to really learn from the device? And so the learning more about what resonates with the consumer by testing and then learning what they click on versus they don't is extremely effective. So we've started with brand voice, and that has been to be honest, one of those product experiences that I wasn't expecting to be as successful as it has been. We built this entire brand center where people can configure all of the inputs to that result in messages being on brand for them. This is like we thought it was going to be an admin tool, and now it's one of the most popular parts of the experience. And so what we want to expand on that with is doing things with incentive optimization, as you might imagine, doing things with visual asset optimization. There is just a ton of opportunity to continue to make it as, I would say, individualized as possible of a message to the person that's receiving it. People have been doing personalization for a while, but that really just means very large segments.
Exactly. I mean, now it's truly, it could be one-to-one, but
Yep.
I think the key is to really take advantage of the current technology. So you mentioned some of these features, which I find opportunities that I find fascinating. And I'm thinking from a standpoint of just building it, like, what's your approach? Like, are you leveraging existing models, and where do you influence? Where do you add that unique value that only you have?
Yeah. So basically, I know I've said conversational commerce a million times in this conversation. See what I did there? I think that for us, all of the Horizon 3 teams are very, very on top of agentic systems, and right now we're working very closely with OpenAI on top of GPT. We've had a lot of success with mini tests on 4.0 Mini, and right now we are working on this product called Shopper that is in its very early beta. So if anybody wants to join it, give me a shout. And essentially what Shopper does is trying to take what we did with SMS sales with those sales associate-based conversations and build out all of the agentic skills that are required to handle those consistently with AI. And so we've got, I want to say 12 customers on board at this point, and the results have been incredible. They can get set up within 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden they have a 24/7, very fast responding, highly personable sales associate on their behalf, or technically, I guess, army of sales associates, because they can all be running in parallel. And what's been really remarkable about this, I got to be honest, I went and was like, generic chatbots. That's just, it's not going to be useful. When we got into like really understanding the specific skills that make a sales associate and a marketing strategy effective, and trains the AI on that, which is basically a whole bunch of earned insights over the lifespan of the company and collaborations with our customers, it can produce incredible results. And an example, there's a company on us that does hair products. And one of the core demographics they serve are people that have gone through chemotherapy. And one of the conversations happened between one of their customers and this brand, trying to identify the best solution for them because of the changes that have occurred to her hair type. And the AI agent had the most empathetic, excellent interaction with this individual. And you could just feel her warmth and energy as a result of this conversation and the help and targeted support that she got in a way that I don't actually think the average sales associate that's untrained, like not as well trained or whatever it might be, could do. It was just perfect. And that was the point for me where I was like, this is real. This is a huge opportunity, and it's something that is the future.
I love that. I think such a beautiful way to wrap up the interview. Well, thank you, Chiara, for really sharing insights, going deep, providing examples on what you are building. It's been a pleasure to learn from you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an awesome conversation. I hope we do get that coffee in San Francisco sometime soon.
Absolutely.